welcome to the Strand. I'm Christina Foxley, the Director of Events. Excuse me.
Lava.
I'm so pleased to welcome award-winning cartoonist Charles Burns, here tonight to discuss X'd Out. This is the first of a three-part series promised to be masterpiece comics. I'm sorry. In its starred review called X'd Out, an apocalyptic hallucination. The visionary artistry of Burns exists beyond the bounds of time and constraints of conventional narrative. Charles Burns' work rose to prominence in Art Spiegelman's Raw magazine in the 1980s. He has illustrated covers of Time, New Yorker, and New York Times Magazine, among many others. Black Hole, his most recent work, received Eisner, Harvey, and Ignatz Awards in 2005. He's going to, after his presentation, he'll stick around and answer questions. I'll be walking around with a wireless microphone, so please wait for that before you speak. And then he'll sign copies of his book for you, which you can purchase downstairs on your way out of the store. Please join me in welcoming visionary cartoonist Charles Burns.
Back there, is that all right? Well, someone's got to turn it up and yell. I'm going to show a bunch of slides and ramble on and talk about them for a little bit. Get started. I usually start by talking about what my influences are. And I grew up in a house where there's a lot of books around. My dad liked comics. He went to the library and picked up books, collections of kind of classic American comics, and he also had these reprints by Valentine Books of Mad Comics by Harvey Kurtzman. And they were probably something I probably shouldn't have been reading them. This is before I could actually even read. But they were black and white reprints of the original Mad Comics before there was a Mad Magazine that were in color originally, and got my hands on these mighty early. Mad Magazine did all these parodies of magazines, books, movies, popular American culture. In this case, again, I was way too young to even to read or to know what the cultural references were. So I didn't know who Wonder Woman was, but I knew that she was kind of sexy. And originally, as I said, this was a color comic, and in the color original, these guys had suits on, but what I looked at them, they were like naked, menacing guys with machine guns. It was a disturbing image. And I didn't know who Sherlock Holmes was either, but this was a parody of Sherlock Holmes. I didn't know who he was, but I knew that this was a very spooky, atmospheric image. And even when they were being humorous, the humor was pretty disturbing too. You got this kind of this sewage monster that, and this guy's dropsy that's broken open. The lock is coming down on his dropsy. It's a little bit disturbing. So these were comics I looked at. It's like one side of the world of comics I was looking at very early on. There were a lot of things, but as far as the style of art that I've been attracted to and kind of emulate, it was this very kind of rich, dark line quality that I saw in these early comics. On the other end of the spectrum, I was one of the rare American kids of my generation who grew up with Tintin. Late 50s and early 60s, Golden Press put out 6 American translations of Tintin books. And I've yet to meet another cartoonist of my generation that ever saw them early on. I think there's plenty of, now they're very accessible, you can find them in any bookstore, but at that point it was like an early attempt to bring them to an American audience, and I guess they probably didn't catch on very well. One thing that was very intriguing to me was opening up these books and looking at the end papers, for example, and you would see all of these characters that you hadn't seen in the books you'd read. So I knew that there had to be other books out there, other stories. And I would stare at these forever. trying to imagine who the characters were, what kind of plots were taking place. On the back of the cover, there was also this very intriguing graphic of this kind of metaphysical landscape. I don't know if that's not a good description, but this landscape with all these elements that I didn't recognize, or I recognized some. There was Tintin and Snowy the dog and Captain Haddock and a few of the other characters, but there was other elements that I didn't recognize. For example, off on the horizon you have this crumbling castle. And I was at the age, probably 5 or so, where that was just this amazingly potent image, and probably the stories that I was dreaming up, thinking about that island were probably more exciting than the story when I finally read it many years later. On the other side here, you've got this very odd, this weird mushroom that I could never figure out what it was. It was a very, very peculiar looking object. I had no idea what it was. So a few years later, I had a friend who was whose parents were French, a friend in school, and he had a couple of French Tintin books, and I realized that that's the source of material. That's where they came from, and there was this incredible frustration of seeing these books but not being able to read them. They were bringing back to my father and asking me to read. He would say, "Well, in this panel, Tintin's walking over here, and then he sees this mushroom." And I'm like, no, I want to hear the exact words. I want to know what the words coming out of his mouth. I want to see what Snowy the dog is saying. So there was this real mystery of this work that I didn't have access to, but I knew it was out there. So that was something that was incredibly intriguing to me. This is a panel from Secret of the Unicorn, the first book that I read of Tintin's. Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha, admit it, you're scared. Come closer to the door. Come closer. Come a little closer. Good. Now look, there's an intercom. Now you have to keep in mind, when I was talking about cultural references or just knowing, not being able to read and knowing what these things were, I didn't know what an intercom was. I'd never heard of an intercom. And I looked at this, and in my mind, it was actually just this kind of this orifice in the wall that was talking, this mouth or this shape embedded in the wall. So there was this, again, it was a very potent image that was embedded in my subconscious at an early age. As you can see, I ripped off Herge mercilessly in other books I've done. This was, I did my end papers based on his for a collection of stories about this character called El Borgo. And the same with the back cover. I did this this big baby cover. I don't think I can read it here. Let's see. No, it's a little too blurry here. Anyway, it is funny. I used fake quotes every time. So for the story that for X'd Out, I like this idea of like having two very distinct threads of the story, where I could kind of go into that influence of Herge and Tintin and create this character that looks like, not that he would come out of that world, but certainly has that influence, much more cartoony, no cast shadows, very kind of open lines, and on the right here, kind of the polar opposite is more the way that I would normally draw with cast shadows and these lines that are it's rendered to show all these kind of deep blacks. Oops, sorry. So here's a cast of characters. We got Knit for Tintin spelled backwards. I haven't really named him, but we'll call him Knit. I guess. So I can call him, and his cat Inky instead of Snowy. And I don't have a good name for the little guy, little pal, who may not be his pal, but I've been calling him Poogie, so we'll call him Poogie. And this is a little sequence from the book where we first are introduced to the character, introduced to Poogie. Pardon, I don't English. Do you speak English? Mouth, eat. No thanks. I'm not going to do the foreign language version of it. mister, you don't eat that junk. It'll make you sick. This is the only part I'll remember. The part where I wake up and don't know where I am. So here you're seeing the protagonist, Doug, who's waking up for the first time, and you're seeing kind of all of his elements that are part of his life. Got a cassette tape recorder, kind of a punk fanzine, notebooks, magazines. In the center there you see some single, like a punk single and some albums. And on the right there's a number of Polaroid SX70 photos. So the Polaroid camera came out. The SX70 came out in the 70s, and it was a pretty amazing camera. Back before digital photography, this was your only access to instant photography, and there was something very gratifying about this kind of beautiful film. It had very rich, intense colors. It was a reflex lens, so you could actually focus through the lens, and it took good pictures. And one thing that was interesting too is that it was the colors came up slowly. God, it's so amazing. I love watching the colors come up. Yeah, I've been taking Polaroids for a couple of years now. So here we see Doug, whose back is to you right now, but he's in art school, and one of his he's kind of a pretentious art student who's trying to emulate his heroes, and one of my heroes back then and still is Lucas Samaras, who was initially no more as a sculptor, but he started taking a lot of photographs, Polaroids, self-portraits, and one thing that was interesting about the SX70s is that the emulsion, when the film came out, it was still malleable, and you could press the emulsion around. So here he's really just actually moving emulsion around and making these very intense images, intense self-portraits. So I tried that when I was an art student, and they sure didn't look this good. I mean, his photos are beautiful. I think I bought a book of photographs on that shelf over there, probably. But he's a hero of mine and hero of the character Doug in the story. And it's always bad to show your photographs after you see someone who's really good, but these are my photographs. I did a series of double portraits of my friends in the late 70s when this story takes place. All my punk friends. Next girlfriend on the top. And this is my first punk show, my first punk concert in the fall of 1977 at the Mabuhay Gardens in San Francisco. And you can't see me, but there I am. my giant whitey afro. My girlfriend cut my hair like 3 days later. I've got stupid punk outfits. What was really intriguing about one of the things that was intriguing about punk and that whole world that I want to think about in this book or talk about in this book, is the fact that it was a turn away from the kind of corporate youth culture that was prevalent at that time. It was this idea that you could make your own band, you could perform, you could record a single for pretty cheap, and you could put it out by yourself. So before Devo even had an album or a record contract, I found this really crudely done single. It's kind of searching for anything.